Hi, I'm Deborah Farrell. I am doing a quilt talk today for folks. I have been involved with quilts and textiles for many years. I was a textile major at Illinois State University, studying under Naomi Towner. I learned to quilt when I was 7 or 8 years old, sitting with my grandmother. So we're going to start talking about general information about quilts. There's When you talk about quilts, there's a pattern and there's style, and these are two different reference points. Pattern refers to the quilt pattern itself, and there are hundreds and hundreds of quilt patterns. And style refers to more about what the usage of the quilt is. Some examples of this particular quilt, we'll come back to this later with restoration or with repairs. This is called a community quilt. Some of the other ones are, there's crazy quilts, there's utility quilts, there's decorative, there's memory quilts, there are brides. That just tells their general type. This is a community quilt in that these are each individual blocks. They have the same pattern on them, which is an applique butterfly. These were given to the members of a community, usually the women of the community. Each one took one home and quilted it, did the applique, did the stitching on it, and then they were brought together and pieced together. And this is not a quilted, stitched quilt. This is a tied quilt. The fun with these is everyone does them just slightly different. They all look the same, but if you look, some of them got a little more with the French knots, curlier antenna. They were a wonderful project for community members to do. You see the butterflies, you see flowers, leaves, the sunbonnet girls, you see a lot of these. These were common from like the 1920s through the 1940s and sometimes into the 50s. This quilt right here, this is a memory quilt done in the crazy quilt style, crazy quilt pattern here. It doesn't have a real defined pattern to it. These are done in blocks. This one, because I know whose quilt this is dated. Actually, this is a very old quilt style, but this was done probably in the 1940s. This is her initials. This is lots of embroidery, lots of ties, and an interesting paisley flannel blanket for the backing on it. This one back up. When it gets into dating quilts, it's very tricky because so many different things go on with quilts. You can have quilts that are done with fabrics from specific time frames. It doesn't mean that that quilt was made or quilted or finished at that time too. Part of that is shown by the number of quilt tops that we have that were never quilted. Quilt tops are a lot more fun to make than doing the whole quilting process. At least some people think that way. But a lot of fabrics were used at different times. Some of them seemed very similar. Let me just reach out for some of these. Let's look at these. One of the patterns that's been used a long time is the 9-patch. This is considered an Amish quilt. Then you can see they're used in different ways. Now this one in particular was perhaps, these looks a lot like 1940s, 1930s, maybe going into the 50s. Sometimes when you didn't see the colors are brighter in this, if you didn't have enough blocks to make a quilt, you filled in with blank ones. They could be other color. This is white muslin that's been used here. When this would be quilted, they would be quilted around here, generally in an X. Part of what tells us this is a newer quilt than something like this is the colors of the fabric. These are much brighter colors. Some bright colors were used, but generally the softer colors. These are a lot of feed sacks, which were actual feed sacks that were used in the 30s and 40s. You bought seed in them. They were these lovely little calico prints, some of them stripes, plaids. They were designed so that the lady of the house could make clothing out of them. But this is again a variation on a very small 9 patch with sashing. I don't know I think that these background pieces are probably close to the same time frame with this. This looks like and feels like regular cotton muslin. These may have been dyed because the muslin didn't usually come in these colors. Let's put these over here. Going back to trying to find dates, every now and then, this is a piece that was of a crazy quilt. Every now and then you'll get something wonderful like this. This is a Memorial Day ribbon from Keokuk, Iowa, and it's dated 1891. So that doesn't mean this was necessarily made in 1891, but this puts it in the time frame. These fabrics do also. When you're looking at quilts to try and date something, there are certain things that you do look for. The type of fabric, there's rarely synthetics used in the old quilts because they weren't around as much. Rayon was used sometimes, silk, cottons, velvets, wools. You can also look at the way they were stitched. Mostly they were hand stitched, although there were sewing machines around quite early. Not everyone had one, but mostly they were hand stitched. Also, the stitches tend to be very small. These are machine stitched ones here, though the nine patch parts themselves are hand stitched in the center. I don't know if you can see that. So these were most of them are hand stitched, some of them are machine stitched. So something tells me that this was started at one time and someone didn't finish it, which, we have a lot of those still. So it was done at different things were done with it. And that helps. The stitching tells you, it seems like back in the earlier days of doing this, stitches were smaller than they are now. When we're doing the quilting in our quilt group, we try and make them small, but sometimes your stitches get a little bit bigger. This memory quilt here is primarily machine stitched, and then all of this embroidery is done by hand. Sometimes a good clue as to how old a quilt is too is the backing on it. These don't have a backing, but this one does. With crazy quilts, you have to stabilize because they're cut a lot of angular pieces, so they have a stretch to them a little bit. They are cut that way, put together, but they need to be stabilized onto a background piece so that they don't stretch when you start to put your quilt together. A lot of just basic muslin was used. Frequently, this is striped ticking. It's also known as mattress ticking. That's frequently what was the cover of mattresses or pillows. A lot of this was, if you had a mattress or you had pillows or any type of covering like that, it wore out in places, you would save everything and use it for something else. That was part of the whole idea of quilting too, of quilts. So this one has been put on a piece of ticking. You can see it used to be a lot brighter blue. But these would be stitched together, bonded to this with, you can see the back of the stitches here. But something like this can tell us that this is probably late 1800s piece. A lot of times when people talk about quilts, they don't know so exactly, or even in a really close range. So you'll say, oh, it's a 1900s quilt, or it's an 1800s quilt, or it can be an early time during that. But it covers a lot of time because you don't really know unless you have someone to tell you, oh yeah, I put those pieces together at one time and then I got tired of it and then my daughter did something. So there's a lot of variation in it that way. This one I find kind of interesting, and we sort of know a little bit about this one. It's 1940s piece. These are pieces of wool that have been put together. It's very precise. There's no, and this would have been a utilitarian quilt had it been finished. Part of what we know about this is because there are labels on the back of these pieces of wool. These are pieces of wool that were samples for men's suits. And they actually came from the Wilt building here in Elkins. So it's a very nice piece. This is very classic stitching. Sometimes it's called feather stitching, sometimes it's called chicken chop stitching. There's all kinds of names for the embroideries that are done on that. But you don't get this lucky and know something specific about this, but they're interesting, and they say novelty silk, striped worsted, make two selections. So this gives us a little more information than some of them do. Let's see, what's another one here? Looking at ones like this, and yeah, I was talking about utilitarian quilts or utility quilts. They are ones that were used exactly for that. They were the ones you had on your blankets. Sometimes they were less fancy. They would be done in very block patterns. They were meant to be used. A lot of those have been used and they're gone by now. So they didn't always have a lot of fill in them. They would have a blanket maybe inside them or some flannel inside it. Or if they were heavy enough, they would just be quilted together with a backing. The decorative quilts were the ones that were like the memory quilts. This would not have been used on a bed because of all of the beautiful work done on that. It is mostly wool. But these were usually either hung or they were laid across the bed, and at night they would be folded and taken off of the bed. Same with wedding quilts or brides quilts. They were usually done by the women in the immediate family or relative or aunts and grandmothers maybe, who would do those, and they would be gifted as part of the wedding gifts. And they had very specific embroidery on them for whoever it was that was being married. Then your utility cotton quilts. We got away from the wool quilts so much, and this is an assortment of the cotton quilts. Just let you guys out of the way for a minute. These are some tops that I got, and these are probably what we would say mid-19th century quilts. They can go anywhere from the 20s to the 50s or so. This is, again, we've gone back to a variation on the 9 patch. This is actually 3 and 3 and a band in between. But they use it in a nice way. And the different colors, these colors are more representative from like the 20s and 30s or so. This is a very nice bright burgundy in here. I'm not sure that this background was originally this color. It may have been a white muslin, but these are very strong reds here, and red was not always a stable dye. So when this got washed, it may have bled to this kind of slightly peachy color, but it doesn't look too bad with it either. This one, you can look at this and see, this is, I'll do it this way so you can see. There are some machine done and some hand done. So we either had a couple of different people working on this, or I don't know what. So it sort of went back and forth on it. Then when the blocks were put together, they were hand stitched together, hand pieced together. So this may have just been a mishmash of stuff that didn't get finished at one time. This is called, the quilt patterns frequently have many different names for basically the same thing. This is a pattern that I especially like. This is called either bow tie or spool, depending on who's talking about it. So I learned this as spool, and then I found out that it's also bow tie. But these are mostly feed sacks. The pieces in here are very colorful. We've got some bright colors. I would say that most of these fabrics came from the same period. This again, there is machine stitching and hand stitching in it. It seems more, well, I can't say that it's one or the other. Sometimes they would hand stitch these and then machine stitch the long strips together. The fabrics in here that I have not been able to determine exactly what's going on or where they came from are some, here's one here, we can see if you can see this. These have photo prints on them. Now, I have not been able to figure out exactly when those were done, but looks like people at a beach, and the time frame looks like those people would be the same time as this quilt was being done. So that's some technology I wasn't sure about that they had, but I'm still trying to find out more. I haven't really seen this on another quilt. This one is just a very simple, little larger squares on it than most the little tiny ones. This one, open this up here. This is hand stitched, and it's fairly nicely small hand stitches in it. This, because of these colors, you sort of think maybe 1960s, 1970s on this, but these colors could go back to the 40s even. Dyes were improving then. They're color fast. Things were advertised as being color fast, which meant it wasn't going to fade as quickly as other ones did. So it's kind of cheerful and bright. Not sure what I'm going to do with it, but I liked it. I have a lot of these that are like that. Let's see. This one I brought because it's one I'm going to save that one for later. In getting into doing repairs on your quilts, the type of repairs that I do are not museum quality because I am not trained in that type of conservation, and I have just learned this through talking to other people and doing study and teaching classes in it. It's not a difficult thing to do, and I'm going to go get something here. I think it's a lot of fun to do. I'm going to show a couple that I'm working on and what products I use. This is a quilt that I'm working on for a friend. She said it's been in her family. She thinks it's about 100 years old. It's not in too bad a condition. She said that she thought she knew it as a pattern that's called Around the World. I'm going to just hold this up like this. It's really quite pretty, small blocks. Now, when she brought this to me, it didn't need huge repairs, but it was coming apart in places. There are places where, I already fixed that one, so there's a little shredding here, a little bit here. A lot of it was just, it had come unstitched. When I start to do this, and what I suggest if you're doing your own quilt, is lay it out on a table, get a lot of safety pins. I use safety pins so they don't accidentally tear more of the fabric and you don't get hurt with them. I go through a little bit at a time and look for any type of thing that needs to be repaired, and I safety pin each little block. You do it all at once and then you don't have to keep going back and looking at the part you already looked at. So that gives you a place to start. Then bring this up to here. Generally, if I have to replace, if I'm just doing stitching, that's very simple. You stitch it, it's hand stitched, you're just replacing the stitching that was there. Sometimes an entire piece will need to be replaced because of too much damage, like this has damage on both sides. Right now, I'm looking for a blue that will go with this. What I find is if you go to the quilt stores and stuff and you buy fabric to replace pieces, it's going to be hard for them to look like this. This quilt has probably been washed so many times. It's what we call, it's been softened. The colors are softer, they're kind of muted. They don't look like brand new fabric. And if you put a piece of brand new fabric in there with it, grab some of this. You know, if you put something like this in here, it's going to be very noticeable. So I try to find fabrics that were what I call aged a little bit. And to do that, I go to the thrift stores frequently, and I'll take, you know, if I need to replace this piece, which I may have to do, I will take this out. The tools that we use are a seam ripper, and you just carefully take this piece out. And then I take that and I pin it to some paper, and I go to the thrift stores and look for clothing that is similar in color. It's already going to have been softened. It's probably been washed a number of times, so it's more likely to fit in with the quilt. It's surprising how much you can find that will work. You know, if you're doing a print, you want something in the same sort of size so that it's not too different. Because I haven't had a lot of luck in finding exactly this blue, I haven't looked real hard yet because I just haven't gotten to that point. What I could do would be to take out a couple of these squares and replace them with something else, but do that all the way around the quilt so it looks intentional. I was doing see, this one just needs to be stitched back in. I was doing a larger quilt a number of years ago that had been folded up nicely on the bed, and the family dog got on it and dug a hole straight through about 4 layers of the quilt, including a spot about this big. And they were concerned that it was not going to be able to be repaired. And I said, oh yeah, we can do this. So what happened was when it had bigger pieces than this in the blocks. Sometimes there would be just a little hole at one place, sometimes it would be bigger. I would save every bit of fabric that I removed because I could use some of those little pieces to repair just a small part of the same print in another location. In doing something that's that large, you start with the back. You repair the back first if that needs it. In this case, the hole went all the way through. Repaired the back with a matching fabric, put new batting in, then repaired the quilt on top of it. And it was sort of winging it because it was gone, so I was just trying to look at other parts of the quilt and kind of guess what might have been there. But it all worked out very nicely. If it's been quilted, this one has just been stitched sort of in here. It hasn't really been quilted a lot. The last step, of course, is going back and re-quilting it in whatever manner it was done, whether it was hand quilted or machine quilted. One of the traditions that I learned in doing quilt repair was when you take a piece out and replace it with an old looking new fabric, I always leave a little bit of the original fabric inside. And you know, when you do this, you open this all the way up, and then you just tuck all the ends back, the raw edges in, and then you just stitch it back in place. You don't try and seam it, you just put it in there. So you have this opened up, and you can just leave a little bit. I always like the idea that if somebody comes at another time to do it, they will see what it was there before. It's a little archaeology in quilting. This one, as I said, I'm working on this one. It's coming along pretty quickly. This is a utilitarian quilt. When we look at the backing on this one, this is a very pretty little rose pattern on it. So this one has what's called a self-binding. The backing has been brought up, folded over, and bound onto it. Some of the other ones have separate bindings that are applied to it. Let's see. Get this one out of the way. Oh, where's my needle? these are the type that are the easiest to repair because you can get fabrics fairly easily to do those. Some of the ones that are harder to repair, and this is why this one hasn't been done yet. This is an early, or this is a probably mid 1800s. It's a crazy quilt. And it has a lot of damage that is typical of quilts of this time. It's going to drop some little pieces everywhere too. Different fabrics have different levels of stability over time. As you can see, these are some issues that come with silk. This is called fracturing or shredding. It's part of quilt, sometimes, or of silk. You can see here, it's completely gone. There are a number of things that you can do. You can replace those silks, but it involves taking out this embroidery, or at least the edges of it, which is a pretty time-consuming thing to do. On ones like this, if these are not historically specific ones or have some particular interest on them, sometimes you just kind of leave them like this and just enjoy, use them as examples. So you can see this one has had, if I open this up, it's had a lot going on the back of it too. This does not actually have a backing on it. As I said with those other ones, when you do, the one that had the ticking in it, when you do a crazy quilt like this, you stitch it to something to hold it and keep it from stretching. I think they stitched it to just about everything they had here. There's so many different fabrics going on, which I think is part of the interest of it too. This tells you a lot about what they had available to them. This one is actually, I thought there was a date on this one, but there isn't, unless I have missed it. There is a name on it, and I don't remember, see, I should have marked where it was. It's like minty or something like that, but it's really, this had to have been an absolutely beautiful piece when it was done. A lot of the different styles of decorative stitching, very characteristic of this type of quilt. But I don't know if this one's going to be replaced or repaired in the near future. Let's see. When it comes to doing repairs too, you frequently have to put new batting in. This type of batting is, find another piece. This is a cotton. Frequently, if you look inside of them, they have like a brown looking soft stuff. That's a cotton bat too. This is not a real stable one. It's also not very thick. But when you are redoing a quilt that has batting inside it, you want to try and find something very similar. You can buy cotton batting like this still. It's not as common as the polyester loft batting that you see now. It's used in quilts most of the time. There is a silk one, which I put someplace. Now I don't see it. But it's not silk, it's bamboo fiber, and it's a very soft felt, and that works well with them too. If you are repairing a quilt and it has the polyester batting in it, you can go ahead and put more polyester into it. But you want to stick with something that is the same, or it will not have the same feel to it. When it comes to the silk fracturing, put this one down here. There is a product that is used in restoration work on pieces like museum cloth. It's called crepe line, and it is a very fine silk, very sheer silk fabric, which you can put on. It can be dyed to match the color that you're using, but sometimes you can just put it over the silk to stabilize it. It's quite expensive, and the only place that I have found it is you have to order it from England. For home repairs, ones like that, there is a suitable product that can be used, and you can get it from a floral shop. This is floral net. It's very, very thin, and it comes in a lot of colors. Get this piece. This can be used to stabilize. So if you're going to hang it up or you're going to put it someplace, where's that other piece of silk here? I want the light going. I don't know. If we'll, going to put it like on here. This can be put down over it. You don't really see it as much as you would think, and it will keep it from fracturing and having more pieces fall off of it. As I said, it comes, this you cannot dye, this is nylon, but you can generally find it to put, it will go over a fabric and will blend in with. This comes in lots of colors, and most florists have these for making their fancy bows and things. But that will work if you're going to just do it for yourself. When it comes to going back and redoing the fancy stitching, there are a number of things that we use if you have to replace all of that. Regular embroidery floss works. This is an old type of pearl cotton. It's a little heavier. It's a little different. It doesn't have as many ply as the embroidery floss. And most of this type of stitching that was done with this pearl cotton. This is, you can still buy this, but this is some old stuff. This was a blue that faded a little bit, so I have multicolors there now. This is a fun little thing. It's supposed to be better than silk. It's called Glossilla rope. And that can be used for doing the fancy stitching or for doing the ties on the quilts also. The things that you really need for doing these repairs of your own, you know, a seam ripper. I like one like this. It has a seam ripper at one end, and it has a thread picker at the other end. So that's been a fun product to use. Fine scissors, lots of pins, safety pins, needles, rulers, whatever of those things that you need. These are some fabrics. These were some that I have from my stash. They're ones that I've bought or inherited from different people who are getting rid of things. Always wash your fabrics to soften them so that they will be more like what you're doing in the repairs. Put this guy over here a little bit. This one, when I got this one, the repairs that needed to be done on it, it was already put together and bound, but something had happened that it didn't, I don't know if it wasn't laid out flat when it was done, but the fabrics didn't lay down flat. There was a lot of bunchiness at one end and stuff, so I took the binding off of it. This is all, I'm sure, just sheets. It's very soft cotton sheets. The batting, this doesn't have batting, this has flannel. This is probably an old flannel blanket. So I took it out, flattened the whole thing out, pinned it all in multiple places. I didn't bother with doing the repair. You know, there's a little staining, but that's characteristic of older quilts. It's not really it wasn't a concern to me. This is, since I was going to use this probably just as a utilitarian quilt. But, you know, it's soft, it's stretched a little, so I put it down, and then these were just retied where it was. There's still some pins in where it goes. Then this will be, probably I need to trim these all down, and I'll put a white muslin binding on it, or perhaps a brighter color, I don't know. I haven't decided on this one yet. Let's see. that's about it. You know, repairs, it's common sense stuff. But the main important thing is to get it to look like what it was and not to use fabrics that are out of character with it. Takes a little research, but if you like quilts, you probably like thrift stores too. So this one that I wanted to show you, this is one of my favorite quilts. This it was given to me by a friend of mine who has since passed on. She was well into her 90s, and I don't know what this pattern is called because it's got a lot going on here, but it's probably 1940s into 1950s. A lot of great color in it. I believe it was machine stitched and then hand quilted. These edges are unusual. You don't see this very often. This would be more of a quilt that would be on your bed, not really one that you'd use a lot. But it's so cheerful. Then we're I was gonna there was these pieces I was gifted, and I'm not quite sure what to make of them. There were 16 of them, I believe. These are made with ties, men's neckties. This is called puff quilt. It's a square, and then it has a little tuck on each corner. They were all bound with another type of fabric, and I can't figure out what they were for, unless I thought maybe they were supposed to be joined, but it didn't seem to make sense with the binding. I'm taking the binding off, and we'll probably quilt them with a sashing in between. This is the old type of cotton bat that you'll find in a lot of the quilts. These have a little piece of fabric that they're stitched to, and it also holds, there's a little wad of batting inside these to make them puff up like this. But these were some pretty wild ties too. These were probably anywhere from 20s to 40s here, 1920s to 1940s. They came in a bag with more ties that were contemporary ties that had all been taken apart beautifully, but I'm just gonna have fun with those one day. So that sort of gives you the basics and information here. When it comes to storage of your quilts, a lot of people will say, oh yes, I put it in a plastic box, or I put it in a plastic bag and it's been in the attic. It's like, no, that's not the best choices. You do not want to put them in plastic. You don't want to put them in bins, plastic bins. Fabrics need to breathe a little bit. The way that I store them and the ones that I am doing for other people will be returned to them in what we call quilt sleeves or quilt bags. This is one of the best ways to do it. You can buy these and they come with a nice little drawstring on them, or you can buy 100% cotton pillowcases, or if you're in the mood, you can go and get cotton sheets at the thrift stores and make your own, which is what I do. And it's just this size, like the size of a queen size pillowcase or so. Just sew them up. I leave them open at the end. When I put the quilt in, then I usually just tuck this inside, or I tie it with a piece of ribbon. Quilts, you may have noticed I sort of roll the quilts when I'm doing them. Folding tends to break down the quilts or the fabric fibers along the folds. You don't want hard folds in them. Generally, I fold them the long ways. I fold them into 4 folds that way and then roll them up. That seems to be the safest way. They don't get squashed too much. Periodically, you can take them out, fold them in a different direction, roll them a different way, flip them over and put them back in your cupboard. You don't want to do more damage to them, and so that somebody else will have to repair them later. But the cotton bags are the best really way to preserve them. They look beautiful if you have them folded in an open cupboard, an open doored cupboard, and that's fine. But if you're going to do that, refold them every few months so that they don't have a real hard, crisp fold on them. But I hope that's enough to get you started on it. It's one of those things that once you start doing it, you just learn you learn as you go with it. There's no really strict rules. Everybody has a slightly different way of doing it. So I hope this has been helpful.
Thank you.